All right, testing one, two, three. Can you all hear me okay? All right, perfect. Good afternoon. We're going to go ahead and get started. I know this has been a very packful day with great sessions and great speakers. And so we have the honor of closing you all out for the day, for at least day one. And I know that there's a bunch of great things happening tomorrow. But I wanted to at least start us off by talking a little bit more about this topic, right? This is very important around the essential role that faculty play in student success. And we'll go through all the details of that, which is going to be hard to cover in just 50 minutes, right? Faculty do so much. But the reality is we have some pretty key priorities and pieces, tools, resources, discussion points, and also stories packed into this brief presentation today. So I'm Ashlie Prioleau. It's a pleasure to meet you all. I'm the Assistant Vice President for Student Success, Retention, and Student Thriving. And I'll pass it along to my colleague.
Hi there, I'm Amanda Getz. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm an interim associate director in first year advising. I've been on the first year advising team since fall of 2019 and also taught the AUX classes for that time. So yeah.
Hi, I'm Michele Lansigan. I go by she, her pronouns as well. And I'm a term faculty in the chemistry department, and I've been teaching at AU since 2014.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get us started here. Like I mentioned, we have a pretty packed presentation, some good tips and tricks along the way. But first, obviously, we wanted to start with what really pulls on our heartstrings and why we get up in the morning and do the work that we do. It's our success stories. It's seeing our students thrive. It's seeing our students be able to accomplish things that maybe they didn't even realize when they first walked into the door at AU or set foot on campus, all the great things that they could accomplish here, and you all play a role in that. So we're going to hear from Michele in a little bit about a great story that she's had specifically with a student, and then we want to hear from you all. So if you thought just because this is the end of the day that we would not have any interaction, right, or breakout groups or discussion points, you are wrong. So we are definitely going to take time out of our presentation to make sure we can hear from the variety of different stories that we know you all have in the room. We'll also talk a little bit more about data. Big shocker, right? Where would we be in terms of our progress and knowing where we stand if we weren't able to look at that picture holistically? So the stories are certainly important, but what does it amount to? What does that look like for our institution specifically? And we'll talk about that from a retention and graduation standpoint. Then my colleague Amanda is going to talk a little bit more about some data connected to academic alerts specifically, and connecting that with other resources and tools that you all will have access to and already do have access to as we embark on this fantastic semester. We don't want to leave you with that, although it was tempting to just say, here's the tools, here's the resources, go forth and thrive. You know, when we talk about student thriving, we also want our faculty and staff to thrive as well. And in order to do that, we really want feedback. We want this to be an exchange, and we're going to leave the door open as we end the session so that we have time to collect your feedback about the tools that you already are aware of, things that you're already using, or ideas that you have to make the experience for our students even stronger. So I hope that that covers a little bit more and gives you a picture of what to expect. And like I mentioned, we're going to start with a story from Michele.
Thank you, Ashlie. So good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Michele Lansigan, and I'm a term faculty in the chemistry department. And today I'm excited to share a success story that illustrates the essential role that we as faculty play to help our students become successful in our classroom. So just a little bit of a background. I teach chemistry courses geared towards non-science majors, so which means that I cater to a diverse set of students. So what does that mean? It means that some of my students are either very, very good at math or science, and then the others would have very minimal exposure to the subject matter. And so for this story that I'm about to say, the student is actually a female student athlete, and she just encountered a lot of challenges throughout the semester. So she's a junior. She's a member of the university's volleyball team. So I made everything anonymous. And I have in here, she struggles with math and science in general. So where did I get that? At the beginning of the semester, I deployed a pre-class survey. And there I ask, what is your preferred name, pronouns, what are your expectations of the course, what are your fears, what causes anxiety, and so on. And I have in my last section, I put in there, Tell me anything about yourself that you'd like me to know. And this is what she wrote in there. I struggle with math and science in general, and my class is a chemistry class, which has a lot of math and science. So that just gave me like a big overview of what this student feels in the class. Throughout the semester, she has a lot of missed assignments and quizzes, and it started really early on in the semester. And overall, she just really struggled with balancing academics and athletics. But when it comes to, as a whole, when we look at it, this student and I, we had a very good line of communication. I offered her a lot of flexibility, and she was able to push through with the class. So she experienced frequent absences due to several bouts of illnesses. She's an athlete. She also suffered an athletic injury. And in between those, she suffered personal and mental well-being challenges. So what are these challenges? For example, at the beginning of the semester, she had COVID. And so she missed the first week of classes. She missed, I think 2 meetings and so on. That was in September. In October, she had a bout of strep throat. And then in November, she suffered a shoulder injury because of her workout practice, and she had to get a cortisol shot just to relieve the pain. And then what made it really worse was that at the end of the semester, we're all gearing up with quizzes and presentations. She had walking pneumonia, and she was not alone. A lot of students suffered from walking pneumonia at that time. In between those, she figured into a minor car accident, and so she came to class late because she had to talk with the police, insurance and everything. And she's also a caregiver to one of her family members who has a chronic illness. And to really, how should I say it? Like, is it add salt to the wound or something like that? Her laptop broke down at the end of the semester, and she emailed me. I could not be making this up. I know you've heard a lot from me this semester, but she showed me a video of her like opening her laptop. It's just a black screen with a white cursor, not doing anything. So I believe her when she said that. And you might ask me, are these even real? Like, do we really believe everything that this student says? Now, I'm gonna tell you, my mantra is I always believe whatever excuse my student tells me because we cannot really judge. I don't know what they're going through. They don't know what I'm going through. But I just wanna make sure that I support them and I offer them kindness, and it's up to them if they wanna lie about it or not, but I did what I feel like I needed to do. So how did I build a framework of support for this student? It actually started even before the semester actually started. So I did proactive steps. So first, as I mentioned, I gave a pre-class survey, and this just gave me an idea of what the student feels about the class, what can I do to make them engage in the classroom, how can I ease their anxiety, and so on. And I also created what I believe is a student-centered syllabus. And CTRL has a lot of workshops on this. I have clear course expectations. So in the syllabus, I have my assignment, my deadlines, I have a clear attendance policy, more than 6 absences, that is ground for failure. I have my policies for flexibility. So for example, if you are experiencing an emergency, please reach out to me within 24 to 48 hours so we can plan out an appropriate timeline for your makeup. If you want to make up an assignment and it's excused, for example, you only have 1 week after the due date of that assignment to make it up. But I just established like open lines of communication. I also make sure that it's inclusive. So for example, they get to drop their lowest quiz score for whatever reason. It's a bad quiz day. I don't feel like taking the quiz today, but they have that buffer. And they also have their list of campus resources that they can turn to for help. What's important here is that I emphasized open and timely communication at the onset of the semester. So, for example, when you say, do you have any questions? And typically students would raise their hands, but then start with, I feel like this is a dumb or stupid question, but, so I would always cut them off and say, there are no stupid questions in my class, so that students will be very open to you and ask you questions, and that just builds the trust. I don't intimidate them or anything. You don't raise your voice or yell, right? But just like make sure that they feel that you are approachable so they can openly communicate with you. I also have open, constant reminders on Canvas. I sent a minimum of 2 emails. I hope they read them, but at the beginning of the week, this is what we're gonna do, and at the end, this is a recap, and in between, reminders of assessments. Because even if you have the schedule listed in your syllabus, chances are they no longer read that, but if you send an email about it, then they would be alerted. So I also have inclusive classroom environment, and I built a sense of community by doing a lot of group activities. And her group mates, her teammates actually really helped her, get caught up with course materials as well. But even if I have these proactive steps, midway through the semester, it became clear that my student was clearly struggling and needed more direct support. So what kind of support did I offer the student, mid-semester? Some actions I took is I initiated several check-ins to learn more about the student's situation. It can be tedious, but if we constantly remind them that we're here for them and that we care for them, it just builds trust and they're more open to, explain what's going on with you. So we acknowledge their challenges, and then we also discuss possible solutions, and also connected the students with campus partners, to her coaches, to her athletic advisor, to her academic advisor, and so on. And the important thing too is that I adjusted deadlines for the students. So I know this may be a lot for some, but I provided makeup opportunities for her. And I think that just allowed her to see that, oh, I can still catch up. It's not a lost cause. It's not a lost case for me. I can still pass the class. So the thing is, with the adjusted deadlines, we are still within that framework in my syllabus policy. So 1 week after the due date, that's all I'm able to offer. And she's still very good with that. It's also good that her athletic advisor at SASP is in constant communication with me. She asks about how is the student doing in terms of attendance, missing assignments, and so on. And so that's just a good, touch point to connect with campus partners. As I mentioned, there's a lot of collaborative learning environments. She was very fortunate to have supportive and understanding teammates who really helped her catch up with course materials, guide her on quizzes, and then basically work together in finishing up their course project. And of course, when things got worse towards the end, they also submitted an academic alert. And I was about to submit a care report, but I held off on that because I saw that the student was able to catch up. But if I see that she's still struggling, then the care report would have been sent as well. So with the outcome, of course, there was academic progress. She completed all of the assignments, and not just completion, but also showed understanding of the course materials. And this is where I'm very proud of her. She got a grade of B. It's not an A, where a lot of students actually wanted to get, but this is a significant improvement from her initial struggles. And so just some key takeaways that I'd like to impart based on this story is that we start with a student-centered syllabus and then offer flexible options that can accommodate students who may be, who might see unforeseen challenges in the future. And then maintain open lines of communication, because that building of trust allows students to really communicate and open up with you. I tell my students, teaching is a two-way learning relationship. They learn from me, but I also want to learn from them. If you build that trust by having that open communication, they're also very welcoming in giving you constructive feedback about the course, and that just also improves the way you teach the class. And of course, we also should balance academic rigor with empathy, so our students will have the opportunity to succeed. But with all of this that I've said, I have in here in bold and in red, believe and support your students, but also maintain academic integrity and set appropriate boundaries. If we see like a recurring pattern, that's like a red flag. For example, whenever there's a quiz, the student is absent, that's something else, right? So we have to also address that, but also do it in a compassionate manner. So I'd like to end my part by showing this email, one of the many emails that we exchange. She said, I can't express to you enough how much you have meant to me this semester in helping me do my best and finish strong. I promise I will work with you just as hard as you are working for me. So that last sentence where she knows that I'm working hard for her also motivated her to work hard and finish the class. So with that, that's just one story of mine. I've had lots more, but this is one of the worst case scenarios where there's illnesses, accidents, injuries, and so on. But with that, maybe we can hear from you as well. We can just have like a small breakout group with your seatmates or partners there and just address these three things. What are you doing that is working well in supporting student academic achievement? What are some challenges that arise while supporting your students? And how do you encourage your students to take ownership of their academic success? Because we're here to support them, but if they don't take ownership of their success, it's also not going to go anywhere. So we can take about maybe 5 minutes for that part. Yeah, you can move around.
You might have to get close to some folks. Here, I think this-
I was breathing. I was like,
Oh, yeah, we're good. We're gonna go through it. Yeah. It's gonna be great.
so there
We're 25 is gonna sneak up on us.
are three groups, so maybe you can ask one from each other three groups.
And then we are online, right? Huh? Are we online? No, this is only in person. Oh, that's why I kept looking up there. I was like,
They are recording it.
got it. Thank you. That's why I was like, I thought there was some
No,
component.
I got it mixed up. I think it was Friday. Did we meet Friday?
Yes.
When did we meet? Yeah,
Yes.
Friday?
Or
Yeah.
Thursday, something like that.
I don't know. But anyway,
Recent.
yeah, when we met, my session tomorrow is on Zoom as well.
Okay.
And so I have it mixed up. I was like,
Oh, right. That's a good point.
So I
Okay.
went-
I literally thought that there were still folks that I'm like talking to, so even as, that helps a lot.
So I
I'm talking to the ether.
Right, I'm like,
So I can go around and bring the mic so you can hear the
oh, that'd be great, yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so take that one and then this one will keep up here.
Okay. And you said you want me to do the debrief, or are you gonna do it? Okay.
So it's a transition.
And then transition, right, okay, just wanted to make sure.
Easy.
Right? I agree, very smooth, very smooth. I know, me too, yeah.
Register, but it's not always like
Weather, close funeral.
Yeah, I definitely believe that. Traffic, a bunch of stuff. Okay, well, let me move the mic for you. There you go.
To students seeking some action from No, to be fair, but we also experienced that with I have a team member sending a list every single week of faculty that we have to So, okay, well, each department has a program, has like a designated faculty member that's reviewing, they like to review courses from other institutions and see what
I'm glad you added the QR code. I'm glad you added the QR code too, given, yeah, people probably don't want it. All right, let me just give like a 2-minute warning. Or 1 minute? Bring it back. 1 more, oh, okay. 1 more minute, folks. I know you're having good conversations. 1 more minute. All right, it's getting kind of quiet in here. I'm going to take that as a sign that we could wrap up. Oh, is there a question? Oh, perfect. Okay. We are going to just take a little bit of time to report out on the different questions that you all discussed in your groups. So is there a group that wants to start? Sure.
Hi, I'm Julie Coe. I'm the Director of Graduate Advising in SPA. And a huge concern that I was just talking with some of my staff members about is that very few instructors, it seems, at least at the graduate level, are using these systems that are available to them. And we were talking about 2 petitions we just got, where is if we had been alerted sometime earlier in the semester, we can usually save the student and get the right things. So for us, a lot of it is the frustration of not ever getting an academic alert or a care report or any of those things. Like I said, I have certain instructors that always do it, but for the most part, and I know everyone's busy and I know the university really pushes it, but I wish there was a better way at the university level to really instill that in instructors because it is so beneficial.
Oh, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I wish you could. This is recorded, right? Like that's you're not alone. Seriously. I think that there are a lot of instructors that are in that same boat.
Yeah, and I know, like, well, I work with the graduate portion. I know our associate dean and our dean like really push the use of them a lot. So I know the message gets out there. I just don't know how to better ensure the instructors are actually thinking about it. I think it's probably they're not thinking about it along the way.
Right. And that's part of the reason why we're here. Full transparency, right? Like this is part of our campaign, if you will. That's probably too strong of a word. But we want to get the message out. These things do exist. And can they always be improved? Absolutely. But that's why we're opening up this two-way street or continuing it, right? So that way we can continue to strengthen this and give access to the people who maybe don't know it exists or maybe forget, right? This is that moment, especially at the beginning of the semester, to make that very clear. So I really appreciate your feedback and your comment. We're right there with you.
That's wonderful to hear.
Yes. Anything else from this group or another group?
And there's no deadlines for this academic alerts, right? Even if you say it's like
Correct.
October, but we can send it
Correct.
anytime we want.
Correct. There's a reason why they're not called early alerts. They're academic alerts. That's what I was told. Okay, so please use them all throughout.
Hello, my name is Anna Littman, and I'm from the Career Center. So I just wanted to mention that we at the Career Center know how much faculty means to our students and for their success after AU, and how much of academic success means for them not only to get into great grad schools or find an employment, but also to feel the confidence and the agency that they can succeed. So what we we have like a exit surveys, we call it, after each appointment. We ask students about how they whether their expectations for the advising appointment was met or not or exceeded. Some comments, we ask them to provide us with some comments, but we also ask if they want to name a professor who is important, who has been important for them in their career development. And students often do that. And then I know that Gihan Fernando, who's my boss, he's in the end of, I'm not sure whether it's semester-based or year-based. He kind of looks at this data and then he sends these messages to faculty and to the department chairs. And I know that professors like to hear about it, love to hear about that, and we love to hear and see how much what you do in the class, how much it matters for students. So. And we're here, I would like the faculty to think about us, the Career Center, as a resource for you that we can help you with making your syllabus and classes and sessions even more important for students, connecting what you do in the class for their career development. So please add us to the resource page, as we would love to be of help to you in your very, very important and challenging work. Well, thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's excellent. I really appreciate that. An excellent point. I wanted to just call out one quick thing. Until you hear stories like this, or until someone from the Career Center or advising, right, comes to you and says, this is the impact that you're making, oftentimes we don't know. We know we're planting seeds, right? We know that the structure is there to create these long-lasting relationships and impacts on these students' lives. But when it comes full circle, it's such a beautiful thing. So thank you for sharing that.
Hi, I'm David Salgado. I'm also in first year advising, but I also adjunct for the art department. I think early on I was told by multiple people, mentors and stuff like that, to send alerts as soon as possible to cover your own AASS. But also just, especially for working with first year students, they don't realize how quickly things can mess up and they can't recover from it. I think the first time I sent an alert, it was like they submitted 2 assignments late. And they were like, oh, it's not that serious. I'm like, it is. Yeah. We only have 5. You cannot recover if you don't get your shit together. Yeah. So you do need to figure that out. And a lot of them don't know. And especially taking the time, if you have expectations, to send an alert once that's not being met. Most of my classes, after 2 absences, you start to like get dinged. So like after that 2 is there, I'm like, you have 2 absences. After this, your grade is going to be affected. You need to make sure that you're communicating with me. If not, it's going to affect you.
Yes.
And being very transparent with that.
That's an important emphasis, right? Early, the better. And that includes by year. So even our first year students, we have to make sure that they're captured. So I just wanted to reiterate what you're saying because we hear that loud and clear. Thank you.
So just to clarify, academic alerts, they don't go into any kind of official documentation in their transcript or anything, right?
No,
Because I
no,
think
not
that's
at all.
one of the reasons that faculty are quite apprehensive to send an alert because they might think, oh, it might go into some sort of personal record, but it does not. So I think maybe clarifying that as well would encourage them to do this more often.
Yes.
Hi. Just something I was thinking about, especially as Michele was telling her story, is, you know, building time into a faculty's job to give that support, right? And faculty have a lot of roles. They have teaching and course prep and research and then their own family and personal life. And so how do you make sure that your teaching and your student mentorship kind of includes that space for when things are going to be challenging and when students really need that extra support so that you're not overextending yourself, but you're kind of expecting that to be part of the work that you do. So I was just kind of reflecting on that while Michele was telling that story.
That's an excellent point. Thank you for mentioning that. And you're right. If we want faculty to participate, be thorough with it, have the time, because they care, right? We have to carve out a space for it.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time. I have 48 students, so I really would have to carve out like a weekend to just go through each student and see that they're submitting their work on time.
That's okay. All right, we'll keep going. That's not a problem. All right, well, let's move into this because what do these individual stories and answers really amount to, right? And I told you there'd be data in this presentation, right? So it shouldn't surprise you, but we're going to talk about everything behind this, right? I think it's important for you all to see the numbers, and even if you're far away, I'll talk about it briefly, but we're looking at our first year and second year retention historically up to our most recent class that we were able to capture in 2023. So there's been pretty consistent 80s range behavior and performance for us, and that's pretty good. Like, let me just take a step back and say that when you compare us across or against other universities in the country, we are at the very high end. I mean, think about that. To get to 88.2%, where we just recently landed, it takes a lot of resources and a lot of people and love and care and protection of our students in order for us to get there. So while we're sharing these resources and there's always opportunity for improvement, we do have a 90% goal. We want to make sure that every student who wants to be here, emphasize, because we're not holding anyone hostage, but every student that wants to be here, regardless of financial, emotional, mental, whatever may come up, we still want to wrap our arms around that student and support them. And so you are seeing the reflection of that in this data. Did we have dips? Were there moments that surprised us across the years? Absolutely. But I think when you invest a lot in that first year experience, and even as we're talking about academic alerts and orientation and other ways that we invest in that first year student, it has to permeate through the rest of their experience at AU. And that's where I'm gonna bring your attention to the red bars. Because something happens, right, between that first year and that second year where we see, I would say, a much larger dip when I compare us against other institutions. When you have that 87%, to then drop into the 70s, that can be quite shocking because you need to study what happened, what's going on. And yes, don't get me wrong, value proposition is a big piece of this, right? Studying the institution, being able to have AU tell its story in a much stronger way that appeals to students, I think is all valid. There are also students that see faculty as a big piece, if not the biggest piece, for why they've come to AU and why they stay at AU. So when you're seeing these rates, see yourselves as a very big piece of that to be able to, on an individual level or on a class or section by section basis, being able to contribute. And I'll give you a very specific example. So at the beginning of the semester, right, we have some students that we know are registered. They're coming into our classes. If we do not capture those students, if we don't understand where they are, starting at that point, that first 2 weeks, right around ad drop, then we can, in some cases, have an inflated base. An inflated base means we have some students that we're not actually tracking in the right way. They shouldn't be a part of our retention rate. So everything from roster verification to academic alerts, the tools and resources that I know Amanda's going to go into a lot of detail, help us spot those students that might be in a different place for whatever reason, and we can intervene with them as soon as possible. So that way, not only are their lives in a better place overall, but the institution is in a better place overall for our students. The same things apply to our graduation picture. So we've had, again, some consistency, especially as we look at our 6-year rate, but there's things that are happening after that 2nd year, that 3rd year, and 4th year that don't get us quite to the 80% that we really want to be hitting, right? If our fall to spring, right now where we're at, we have a 97% persistence rate, which is fantastic. That means our students are moving with us as we go from fall to spring. But then to go to 88.2%, and then over time drop again into the 70s, and as you could see in previous years into the 60s, that becomes a little bit alarming. Why aren't our students maybe able to graduate in 4 years, 5? Some of them aren't even graduating in 6, and they're making conscious decisions about why that is. We, as a whole, can capture students and collect information and input throughout their time in order to make sure that what they're investing actually pays off, that they end up seeing the return on their investment by having a degree from American University. One of the other examples that I'll give is that we know that faculty members specifically, research is showing, can spend upwards of 200 to 225 hours in front of students, right, through class time, meeting every single week, multiple days a week. And so when you compare that to some of our other offices, my office, Office of Student Success, advising, we don't necessarily have that amount of time in front of the student. So I want to go back to the point that you made about carving out the time, right? Because a lot of that is face-to-face, it's teaching, it's office hours, but we want to make sure that we can lean on you all as a whole, as a campus, to be able to help students when they do fall off path or track for whatever reason. So to understand that, let's take a deeper dive into academic alerts data so that you can start to see when it matters, how it matters, and I'll let Amanda walk through that. There you go.
Can you all hear me okay? Okay. I wish that we had a little bit more time together because honestly, I could just talk on and on about what we've got going on for the rest of our session, but we're limited in time. Anywho, I want to talk a little bit about academic alerts since we kind of started there. I want to point out that there's a purpose for these, right? Like the why here is basically so that students know that they are not meeting some type of performance indicator for them to succeed in the class, right? In a specific class. All instructors have access to send academic alerts. It's not just for first-year students. It's not just for undergraduate students. Graduate students are included in that as well. And it's a space for instructors to normalize to students that students struggle academically, but there is a way for them to make an academic comeback, right? There's a way for them to improve over the course of the semester. They're not recorded on any academic transcript or permanent academic record. They are recorded into CRM Advise for advisors to see, which is really helpful for us, but it's not punitive in nature, right? It's just a communication tool, a heads up, if you will. And so when an instructor sends an academic alert, the student's notified, obviously. They're given a link to academic coaching. Their advisor is CC'd. And then that kind of opens up a space for feedback. So it's important, we kind of talked a little bit about this, for it to happen early, and mainly because we want to make space for there to actually be something done with that, right? So in the first 5 weeks of the semester, well, really the first 2 weeks of the semester is particularly important because that's the add drop period. So if you've got a student who hasn't shown up once in your first 2 weeks of the semester, that's a reason for them to say, hey, like you need to drop the class because there may not be a way for you to kind of improve from here. But the first 5 weeks of the semester are particularly important because it helps students be proactive. It helps advisors be proactive to meet with students and maybe for them to set up appointments with coaching or other resources. Weeks 6 through 10 tend to be a little bit more about, what are the priorities here? Maybe you fell behind, maybe you got sick, but what do you need to do to catch up? And the end of the 10th week is the end of the withdrawal period, right? And so students still have in that time window a little bit of space to say, maybe I can't catch up and I need to meet with my advisor to say, I can't catch up, rather than have a failing grade that's impacting my GPA, maybe I withdraw from the class if there's space to do that. And then the last few weeks of the semester are really just to set up the student to know what they're walking into and grade-wise at the end of the semester, right? There might not be a whole ton that the student can do to bring back their grades, say from a failing grade to an A, right? But it might be able to set up some expectations for, what to do for the rest of the semester. And then just to kind of like go over a little bit more of this, academic alerts, they create a personalized email. The instructor comment that you or faculty put in is exactly what's sent to students. So if you say you received a 60 on your exam, that's all that's being sent to the student, right? So the language there really matters, and I'll go into that in a little bit. They get a coaching link, they get the advisor's contact, and then that goes to CRM. And it's up to the student really to decide whether or not they're going to kind of, take initiative there. The piece I really want to open up here is that academic alerts help us to avoid students receiving academic warnings or going on academic probation, which are recorded and a little bit more punitive in nature. So kind of like going through the process again, like at the beginning of the semester, students should know when they get an academic alert what that means, right? So faculty at the beginning of the semester, you can put that into your syllabus or you can just kind of mention it in class, can say, hey, if there's ever a point in the semester where I'm concerned about something, I'm gonna use academic alerts as my way of saying that, right? Just normalize that. It's not punitive, it's just a way for me to communicate with you. So if a faculty is, noticing something academic in nature, right, that's concerning about the student's performance, obviously we want you to discuss that with the student, but we also want you to put that into an academic alert so that, the student receives that, the advisor receives that, and it's on kind of like a internal record, if you will, for supportive pieces. Depending on the context, the advisor might reach out. So if you're saying like, hey, I think you should work with your advisor to withdraw from the class, that's something where as an advisor, I would reach out to the student and say, hey, it looks like your faculty member is saying that this may not be, you may not possibly pass the class. Let's talk more about that. If it's more about, hey, your writing content isn't up to par, then I might reach out and say, hey, here's some information about different writing-based resources to help skill build there, right? And then this last piece, again, is the most important, is that it's on the student, right? Like, we can reach out as much as we want to, but it's on the student to take kind of the initiative. The key point is, though, that just because it's on the student doesn't mean that we can't kind of like make it a little bit more open for students to want to take the initiative. If I tell a student, hey, you're failing my class, what does the student do with that? They just kind of accept it. If I say, hey, right now you have a failing grade in the class, but if you do X, Y, Z, if you take these action steps and I encourage you to do that and work with me, then maybe we can kind of turn that into a different outcome. Yeah, we kind of already went over that. So moving on. Sorry to be a data person, but I did major in finance, so I love a good spreadsheet. I'm not going to go over all of this. I just want to go over some key things. So basically what this is showing us is the outcome for a student's grade based on whether or not they have a academic alert. And so what we see here is that 24% of students who got an academic alert actually failed the class, but we do see a lot of students that ended up turning it into a passing grade, right? We also have it broken down based on when the academic alert happens. And so as you can see, the further we get into the semester, it might be a little bit more about just expectation setting, right? You're failing the class. Don't be surprised at the end of the semester that you're failing the class. Or, you know, if it's early on, maybe you're able to kind of pull your grade around, back up a little bit. And so the timing matters. The good thing is that 59% of students who received an academic alert were actually able to pass the class with a C or higher, right? That's a lot of students that were given a heads up and said, okay, I can do something with that. And the earlier the better, right? 69% of students that had an alert within the first 6 weeks of the semester were able to pass with a C or higher. So the chances of success are better the earlier. I'm breaking it down a little bit. My next slide will go into grad students. But for first-time freshmen, right, we see a whole lot of students for academic alerts getting those in the first year. That's probably because we've created such a culture around the AU core, foundation classes, AUX, complex problems, writing, things like that. And so we see a lot of support happening for first-year students, and we might be losing some of that support for our upperclassmen. Specifically, our transfer students get a lot less in terms of academic alerts. Part of that might be because they've been around the block. You know, they've taken some college coursework elsewhere, and they might just be better prepared for classes. But another piece of that is that, you know, there's classes that are being taught that aren't necessarily at the first year level. And maybe we're just, you know, assuming that they're going to be fine. But we do see a fair number of transfer students who aren't getting academic alerts, who are, the further we go along, right, into the semester, they're getting maybe an academic alert too late. So we basically just have an opportunity to reinforce some of those resources for our upperclassmen. Coming into our doctoral students and our master's students, we see a lot of them sometimes, right, getting some academic alerts, but we see a lot of people who are not passing, right, without an academic alert, right? And so there's a lot of room for improvement there. And so we just want to make sure that, you know, our doctoral students aren't being left behind either. And so while this is a great conversation for, you know, helping first-year students and undergraduate students kind of like set up for success for retention and graduation, we don't want to leave our graduate students behind either. Okay, so all of that coming to say, we'll send out these slides, so if you want to look more into the data later, you absolutely can. But all coming to say that academic alerts are really helpful, but if you're not really sure what you want the student to do with the academic alert, then there's not a whole ton that can, I don't know what I'm trying to say. I lost myself there for a second. End of the day. It's helpful to know why you're sending an academic alert before sending it, and to know what do you want the student to do with that, right? And to be really clear about that. So I always say, as an advisor, it's helpful for you to be clear, concise, but also humanizing, right? If you were the person that was receiving that, what would you want to be told? And kind of like a little bit more of an action-oriented or expectation-setting piece. So I get a lot of academic alerts that are like, you have 6 absences. I don't know your absence policy as an advisor. I don't know what to tell the student for that. So maybe including your makeup policy or your absence policy in the academic alert itself would be helpful. Showing some flexibility is also really great. If you don't have flexibility, then, you know, say that, right? You know, expectation setting. If you're more so concerned about a student's skill, so like your writing skills or your critical thinking skills or whatever it may be, need some improvement, you know, saying like, hey, based on the work you've submitted or your exams or your assignments, whatever it may be, I think these resources might help you improve, right? The Writing Center might help you improve. Tutoring in this class might help you improve. Supplemental instruction might help you improve. And if it really is just you're failing and you need to drop the class or you need to withdraw from the class, having them work with their advisor to discuss the options first, because there's a lot of reasons why a student might not be able to just drop a class or withdraw from a class. Okay, so going beyond academic alerts, because I love academic alerts, but they only go so far. Roster verification. So Ashlie mentioned that a little bit earlier. During the first 2 weeks of the semester, if a student does not show up to your class, that's why the roster verification exists. We get a lot of students that are like, I thought I dropped that class. Why did I get an F in it? Well, because you never dropped the class. And so keeping that in mind, it's helpful to have those roster verifications to help students with petitions, last dates of attendance, so on and so forth. Syllabi, Michele kind of went over a little bit around inclusive syllabi, or kind of like student-centered syllabi, making it really clear where you can be flexible and having student resources right in there and on campus. If you have a teaching assistant, I've found that having a peer facilitator in the classroom, it's just a second set of eyes and ears to say, hey, this person said something about their grandma passing away, and that's concerning, right? And that's something for me to say, okay, well, now I know to keep that in mind for performance or engagement or whatever it may be. Care referrals are different than academic alerts. So a care referral is where the situation may not be academic in nature, or there might be something more than just an academic piece going on. If the student is, say, struggling mentally, they've had a death in the family, they're experiencing hazing, so on and so forth, that's where care referrals can be used, where you can submit one, loop in DOS, but you can expect to not hear back from DOS about it, right? They might say, we're following up on this, or we're not following up on this because of XYZ reason, and that's where it gets left. Whereas academic alerts, you can be a little bit more direct with the student about like, hey, I want you to reach out to me about XYZ. Advising. So if the academic alert, if you don't want to put too much into the academic alert, you can always reach out to the advisor directly, right? I've found that more often than not, when a faculty member is giving me more detail that I can use, it's been really helpful to kind of get a just bigger picture of what to keep in mind for the student, but not necessarily putting that in front of the student's eyes, right? And so it's okay to say, hey, here's some more information as we support. And then this last piece for academic support units, that's kind of like where the sheet comes in. There's a lot of different academic in nature support resources on campus, things that help students within their classes. And so you can use that. You can use the front page for sending off to students and saying, hey, here's some resources on campus. You can use that throughout. And then a couple of these things are linked on the back. I did put a QR code for that, so these slides will be up if you want to have a digital access point. And I'm going to hand it back to Ashlie.
Thank you. That was very thorough, Amanda. If you all have any questions, we will be able to just take a couple minutes after the presentation and stand aside, but we don't want to hold anyone up. We know we're at time, so we do have two final asks for you. One is to, again, exchange with us. We want this to be an open door. Scan this QR code to continuously provide us feedback. I'm going to check this multiple points in the semester, but it'd be great for the folks in this room to share, if you have any ideas, feedback about the tools and resources that were shared already, ways that you could better support your students, or we can support you that helps us support our students. And then if you want to be involved, right? We don't want to leave you hanging. We want you to be a part of the solution. So fill that QR code out for us. And then, and since we're in the spirit of giving feedback, we would love your feedback also on the front of this actual session, because we'll continuously do this every year for Ann Farron in some way, shape, or form, and also for the Student Success Summit that happens in August. So with that, I think we're good. Anything else? Yeah, we can go to all the QR codes for you if you need to. But thank you all so much for your time. We really appreciate it. I know it's the end of the day, but we hope to see you tomorrow as well. Take care.